Hi everybody, my name is Melanie Rogers and I'm inviting you all to tune in to my show, Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow, every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on clearsourceradio.com and iHeartRadio. Hey everyone, you are now listening to Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow on the Clear Source Radio Network. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again to lift this. I'm having a hard time talking tonight. I'll explain that in a moment. But anyway, once again, you're listening to Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow, part of the Clear Source Radio Network, where people inspire people, and also heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Spreaker. At this point, I think that's where we are. So I find out all the time, that we're expanding more and more. So anyway, I want to thank you once again for tuning in. My name's Melanie Rogers and I'm your host. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. This is week 3. So how's it feel? I'll tell you from my point of view, the whole clarity and focus and happy new year, happy new decade, light, air around me and all that. It's continuing. So that's a really great thing. So when I say Happy New Year, I'm kind of meaning it. Well, like I always mean it, of course, to reflect back on that feeling at the beginning of the year, since we're only in the 3rd week, though. Basically, Happy New Year, because it's still the beginning of the year. It is still a new year. So, the voice thing, I have to tell you, I'm really, really thrilled. I've talked about this many, many, many times, but, for one reference, one of my references that I personally utilize, and there are so many out there, but one of the references that I utilize is Elizabeth Peru. You've heard her name if you've listened to the show. You've heard me mention her name, a number of times. Anyway, so I started reading the newsletter periodically again. I actually went through a period of time at the end of last year where I wasn't reading it at all. And I knew better, but the thing is, when I became very congested, it is really hard to stay in that light spiritual, with that spiritual frame of mind. If you're a spiritual person and you have those deep rooted thoughts and feelings, even when we go through hard times, it's hard to hold on to the spiritual connection. And part of when I say practicing like my spiritual stuff, which is everything from just trying to flip the switch, basically, concentrating so hard on everything that I've talked about on here, also utilizing those sources and those resources like Elizabeth Peru and people who they know their stuff, okay, and they go by the information that they are made aware of, all the universal stuff that some people just think is way out there. Some of us have realized, no, there's something big to it. And of course, some people live their lives based on that. Okay, I'm striving someday to be that 3rd group of people so that I can just let go and let flow kind of thing. So anyway, moral of the story is that even those of us who try really, really hard to follow our spiritual thoughts and feelings inside and that guidance that we believe we are receiving, and I believe everybody receives it. I think some of us become more in tuned over a period of time through situations or time or lifetimes, whatever. I'm going real deep real quickly. That's the frame of mind I'm in lately, which is a fantastic way to feel after being congested for so long. So I know I'm already all over the place here, but moral of my story here is that when people like me struggle and allow things to build up, for whatever reason, And I think it's kind of subconscious to push away all that stuff that's going to help you understand, So whether it's kind of self-mutilization or whatever you want to call it, trying to make things as hard on ourselves as possible or not, I don't know. Maybe I'm still a little bit in that frame of mind, or was at the end of last year, where all these references that could have helped me, it made it harder and harder for me to even turn to those references. You go into defense mode, all right? Like I said, I'm starting off pretty big here, and I wasn't even expecting to talk about this, but you go into defense mode when you feel like you're being attacked, whether it's by your own thoughts, feelings, or situations, whatever. A lot of us go into defense mode. When we go into defense mode, we don't allow other people or other people's words and such in. Okay? I don't like being in that place. I like being in the place I'm in right now. So with that being said, lately I've been paying attention to Elizabeth Prue. Not daily again. I'm kind of slowly backing into all of my sources and resources that I, was relying heavily on at different times. And, like I was talking about last week, sometimes there's a time with different situations, different frames of mind, different people, where we dive in headstrong completely, like I would be utilizing all of those spiritual resources. And then there's a time where it feels more right to just kind of go with the flow and let it develop on its own. So I'm feeling like the desire to lack that need to control, if that makes sense, in me right now says, in order to stay light, don't get hardcore about anything, including your own progression. Okay? I'm sorry if that's way out there right off the bat, but like I said, I guess I'm apparently in this frame of mind. So with that being said, that long drawn out explanation is I had listened, she's got her videos, or her audio and her videos as well, that go along with this, but I actually read it. Not that that matters, but recently, and I think it might have been like Friday or Saturday in her newsletter, she was referring to Mercury. I don't believe we're in Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde has to do with communication. That's why we have issues. But that's also why we have the opportunity to be heard. So that's where it's a double-edged sword with Mercury retrograde, from what I've learned, is, if we pay attention and flow with it, then we can use it to our advantage. Otherwise, we can cause all sorts of chaos, miscommunicating and such. But I don't believe we're in Mercury retrograde right now, but what she was talking about is Mercury's impact on us right now, that Mercury is doing whatever it was doing. And I don't even know if that's the case right now, but all of this build-up, by the way, is to show you like the validation behind this stuff. To really, if you start paying attention to it, you might be like me going, wow, it's like magic. It makes sense. I mean, it really makes sense when you follow stuff like that. And it's true to life with what's going on. It also gives a big feeling of faith and such, to know that it's literally in the stars. So what she was saying is that Mercury's effect right now on the universe has to do with communication. So without reading it and try to make it as brief as possible, it has to do with communication. Right now, apparently there's an open door. Communicate. Communication is huge, okay? If you have situations building up inside you, or, thoughts about things or plans or goals or anything you've got, don't hold it in. Like right now is a great way and a great time to communicate it. But at the same time, communication, that's your throat chakra. And I've talked about this before when I feel like I'm struggling talking, where it's a throat chakra thing, and I can look back and think of different reasons why I feel stifled or whatever the situation is. I don't feel stifled right now, but what she was referring to was people starting to feel or experience issues with their throat, like physical issues. And what was really interesting about this is I started clearing my throat before I read it. And then when I read it, I'm like, okay, it's not just sinuses draining or whatever. Like all of a sudden, my throat was, I just constantly clearing my throat, and my throat, was just ucky. I wasn't sick or anything. But then I woke up, I think it was Saturday, and as I was talking, I realized I was straining to talk, and it literally felt like I had been to a concert the day before. You know that feeling? Not painful or anything, but when you've overworked your voice cords. With me, it's like a concert when I'm yelling or I'm talking really loud, or like a football game or something like that, or singing and such, that I'll strain my vocal cords, and then I'll go like this. I'll sound like this because I'm actually straining to talk. And I remember talking, going like, what's going on with my throat? I haven't been doing anything, going home, relaxing, doing whatever. And then I referred back to what Elizabeth Prue was talking about. And the funny thing is that I experienced that, and also a coworker of mine, I was working and I kept hearing him clearing his throat. And I thought about it, and what she was saying is mostly more enlightened people who are more aware of their universal aspect, I guess, their position in the universe, whatever. People who are opening up to the deeper depths of life, I guess, are probably going to experience this, or experience it more than others, okay? And that's what I found interesting, was that he's somebody who I have actually talked to about some of the spiritual stuff, because in the world I work, where the place I work, obviously people are very logical. People are very left-brained. I'm a mix of left brain, right brain. I'm kind of right in the middle. I even took the test, and I'm pretty much 50-50. So my spiritual part, when I'm at work, I don't really talk about all that much, because there's not too many people who are on that same brainwave, I guess. Okay? I talk about that kind of stuff more when I'm in and around my friends who are in the paranormal or the metaphysical world, because obviously they're very right-brained. You see what I'm saying? So I thought it was really interesting. That's a little small story, but I thought it was really interesting how I'm going through this with my throat. And my coworker, one of the few people I've actually, talked to about some of Elizabeth Prue's stuff and such, and I can tell that he's kind of on that level to a certain extent as well, sat there clearing his throat. Now, could it be something completely different? Absolutely. Of course it could. But I start watching these synchronicities, and when you really open up your eyes and you look for things like signs and synchronicities and such, it actually helps once you start really seeing it, because like I said, it's like magic. We might believe in it, but like a child, you can explain something to a child and they believe in it completely, but as we get older, you can explain something like Santa Claus or, whatever. You can explain universal stuff, and people would think, oh, that's really interesting and it makes sense, but deep inside, does it really make sense? Because our logical human side is saying, nope, it doesn't make sense. It's more like magic. And once you experience magic, you're like a little kid again going, oh my God, it's real. Okay, so I start looking for that kind of stuff, and I start seeing that kind of stuff and experiencing it, and I thought I would share it with you because it's like magic, right? Okay, so let me see. I'm trying to think of what else. I'm being distracted a little bit. I hear something out there, and I'm trying to figure out who that is. So, okay, past that, what I wanted to talk about, actually, this was really kind of cool. Okay, what I was going to come on here and talk about this week really had more to do with, because it's the new year, and I know last year I was talking about creating a list of shows for different, for different moods or different goals we're trying to achieve. Short term, I'm talking about like relaxation or energizing and such, and I was going to put together a list of possibilities to think about. And, to utilize, okay, like if I am lacking in focus, come on and talk about the different colors or the different words, even the different sounds, different techniques you can use to achieve this kind of stuff. And I wanted to follow that based on last week's show, kind of talking a little bit about meditation, and I also wanted to expound on that. But in true fashion, I got into a really interesting conversation with a coworker, and it just spurred up stuff in my mind, and I thought this would be a really good show because it's something I had thought about and something I have just thought about all my life. They're deep life realizations that made such an impact on me in my life, I thought I would share it. And it has absolutely nothing to do with meditation and such. So we're going to have to put that there, on the back burner. And let me grab a little bit of coffee here so I can stay focused. So, okay, I'm going to tell you this whole story and how we actually got into this conversation, because this shows how one thing progresses into the next. Okay, we're talking about kind of progression in the show, progression in life and such. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start it off by saying I am no means trying to offend anyone. I am not trying to offend any generation. Okay, so when I refer to this generation, because this is what we were talking about, don't be offended. This is how I see it, okay? And I see this as a product. This generation is a product being created by society. And as we so-called, quote, progress in society with electronics and such, how I believe it's taking away from this generation. And I feel, and I fear in my heart that it's going to progress in a bad way in the future. Or I'm not going to say bad way. I'm going to say it's going to continue to create more of the symptoms that I'm seeing, which was our conversation. Now, from the very beginning, I'm going to show you how this conversation progressed. All right. This is going to be shocking hearing this on my show, but there is a thing out, and some people may know this, some people may not. Don't cringe. Just keep your mind open, because this is going somewhere. All right. I saw it on Facebook at first, and we were joking about it last year sometime. I'm like, oh my gosh. And we had a discussion that started it back then. There are sex toys out there, and they are human looking, very human looking. They look, they feel, they act like humans. They even have voices. They even have some with all this artificial intelligence or smart technology. They even have some that will actually, over time, create a bond with the person. Okay? The more you talk to them, the more they get to know you. The more they are able to respond to you like a human would, by kind of getting to know you. Now, that sounds creepy, yes. But think about everything going on in society right now. Every what is the word I'm trying to say? Not just progression, but what society, see, I'm losing my small words. The things that society, the word that means progression, I guess. It'll come to me. Yeah, it's the most simple word in the world. It's probably very overused these days with technology and such. But everything's smart these days. They have a smart bed, smartphones, smart homes, smart cars. They've got everything that basically will do the work for you. Okay? And connect the world socially to a certain extent. Okay, it's connecting us in a different way than we used to connect. In some respects, we're connecting more. We're able to keep up with each other. I've talked about this before, the good parts of things like Facebook and such. We are able to keep up with each other over a lifetime without communicating daily, without keeping somebody's phone number, without keeping up, because we meet way too many people in a lifetime. Pretty much we all do, or the majority of us do, from moving from place to place and changing in life and such, right? So that's the good part. I look at it. These are my opinions. That's the good part of things like social media and cell phones and stuff. Keeping up with people, even if you have them in their own little folder, they're still there. You can keep in touch with them. The negative parts obviously are creepers and people who stalk and people who keep up a little too much. Or another show I wanted to show many examples how you can get to know a lot about a person based on social media, which could be good, it could be bad. But also how you can also be deceived by what you see on social media. Now that's a future show, because I really started thinking about that, and I thought it was worthy of a show. But anyway, moral of the story is social media is one of many things that's considered smart these days. Now they're going toward artificial intelligence kind of thing, where these robots and the smart technology is supposed to start reacting to us emotionally. Okay, now how a computer or electronics can react emotionally, I think it's, artificial emotion, obviously, but how something will start to get to know you, that is scary to me. Let me tell you, I have a certain amount of smart technology in my life. I do not have all the smart technology that people do, because I'm already being tracked based on my cell phone. And when I say tracked, I'm not just talking about people tracking where you're going and what you're doing, but conversations, things in the background. You talk in the background and it's picked up by your phone. Okay, so nothing is private anymore. I think any kind of secrecy, any kind of real privacy can be really invaded if you have any kind of smart technology around you. So anyway, I'm jumping ahead. This is actually going into a more human place, but keep in mind what I started talking about. This sex doll. All right. Now, I'm also not judging. All right. People need vices, and I'm not just talking sexually, but that's still one. People need vices. People are different. People have different beliefs, different fears, different or feelings, different emotions and such. We're raised differently, everything. Okay. Now, whatever, floats the boat for somebody, it doesn't necessarily make them a freak or anything. So when I'm throwing that out there, just like everything else, is don't judge. We're trying not to judge, right? I'm working on that myself. But yeah, we were joking about it. We were joking about it with like certain coworkers, of course, because when you've been together with other coworkers for as many years as we have, we'll use anything and everything to just kind of get a laugh, right? So we were looking at this video and we started talking about how sad it could be. And like I said, in some cases, with some people, I'm not saying you're a sad person if you indulge in this, but people have their different reasons for different things. I know, you're going to get tired of hearing me say that, but I'm not going to stop saying that because I really don't want people to judge based on my words on my show. Go to somebody else's show and judge, whatever. So anyway, that was, the conversation really led into a more serious place, and we were talking about how there is a lack of connection. How a lot of times people will fall to things like this life-size woman, and they were showing in the article, and I actually saw a video, and it was kind of compelling, people cuddling with this artificial being that was being created to also respond to our emotions. Okay, there's a sadness in that, yes, but there's also kind of a happiness in the back of my mind thinking, at least people who are going through that, if they end up putting this money into this because they've lost hope with other humans or whatever the scenario is, then they're feeling some sort of relief, even if it's cuddling a doll, basically. Okay, so that's how I look at it. Now, of course, we got into a deep conversation. Now, a couple days ago, I was looking through Facebook, and one of the ads, somebody had posted this. They're coming out with a male version for women. Now, of course, you know where the joke went with this. I'm the one that saw it, and I had to go and show my coworker, and I was like, well, looks like I'm going to end up with a guy yet. Of course I was joking. But we ended up talking and going kind of even a little bit further into it and talking about how the sadness in it isn't necessarily the people. Because that's what I said. I'm like, I'm not judging. I don't look at everyone like, oh, you're a freak if you're going to go and, do something like that or utilize something like that, whatever. We started talking on a deep level about how today's society, and we are seeing it in this generation, how a lot of society and a lot of this generation, okay, we'll put it that way, is so disconnected on a personal level with individual beings, with individual people, that all of our social interactions is via internet, is via the phone, utilizing Facebook and such, utilizing text messaging, and that's always hard to distinguish what people are talking about. But, we start talking about on a deep level how that's creating a lack of heart. Now, I'm going to show you where I'm going with that, but first, I'm going to try to cover all the different areas we were talking about, because as soon as I was done with that, I said, that's the show I'm going to do. Now, of course, we went in so many different directions. I'm going to try to fit all those in because it was, we really did. But starting off, we were talking about, and he was talking about this, that things like, think about it, how things like dating, okay, it used to be where you have to interact with each other. There was no online dating, okay? You get to know each other. You go out. That was part of it. It's the social aspect. Because he was talking about how, his daughter's very shy and she gets socially awkward at different times and such. But that... what he sees now, because of what he does, he works with kids, okay, coaching. And what he sees is how they can all be in a room and everyone's looking at a smartphone. They can even be texting each other right in the same room. He says there's a complete disconnect of actually looking each other face to face and talking. And I said, I see the same thing with adults now. So we're all being conditioned in that way, yes. But the new generation, and these were his words, he's like, it's kind of sad is that, and he thought about it for a moment, so we're trying to think of what a good age would be. He says probably anyone from like about 30 years old younger has never lived in a time without a cell phone. Okay, so that prompted me to think back, and I told him, I'm like, I was thinking about this the other day, and this was really interesting. Now, in this conversation, it was really interesting because I was thinking about a time back in the day. I said, think about it now. When we go to watch TV, we can pick up our phone. We can stream immediately from the very beginning any show, any movie we want to watch, right? Excuse me. Some that are even in theaters. I said, but think about before, and this is what I was thinking about the other day, so I thought it was kind of funny. I kind of laughed about it the other day when I thought about when cable TV came out and we had an option, okay, cable TV. And then different channels in cable TV came out. And I thought, wasn't that the best feeling in the world? We felt like, oh my gosh, this is so cool that we can actually go and watch any of these movies that we were never able to see before unless we went to the movie theater. We can watch them on these cable shows, okay? We can pull up Lifetime Movie Network and see Lifetime movies without having to wait for them at a certain time, a certain day, whatever. And I was thinking about that, and I took myself back to that moment and that feeling of how exciting that was. And it was exciting for me having cable back in the day. But then I realized, well, wait a minute. Before that, I thought of all the steps that we progressed past that, okay? And how now it's so easy. There is no excitement. It's like, okay, well, obviously I can watch that anytime I want. It's not, oh my God, this is so cool. I can watch that anytime I want. I referred back as well to the first time we had VHS tapes. The first time we were able to actually record something and watch it whenever we wanted. That was the key, whenever we wanted. We still had to work for it. We had to pay for it. We had to record it when it was on. And that felt like, wow, this is so cool. I'm so excited that now I have this tape. I can watch this show or this movie anytime I want to. That was an exciting feeling. Technology is so much more now, and it's not as exciting. Okay? You're going to see where I'm going with this, by the way. Now, I thought back even further. I'm like, okay, I kind of forgot about all the different steps within my lifetime. Okay, I just hit my big 50, right? So I can actually look back and think back to a time when everyone, jokes and puts it out on Facebook about how we lived in a time where, our fun was being outside on a bike or roller skates or going to our friend's house or swimming or whatever, right? So different these days. Now, this isn't just going to be about technology, but hopefully I'm going to show you where I'm going with this. I went all the way back and I tried to remember from the time I was born, or the first time I remember TVs. As one example. First of all, we had phones that were rotary and they were plugged into the wall, okay? You had to, have phone service, which was basically on or off, okay? You had to be there when a phone call came in and answer it, or else you'd miss it and not know who was calling and such, right? At that same time, we had televisions. You were so blessed if you had a big television, which was a huge box, okay? Remember the console TVs? But guess what? When people had that, when we upgraded to that console TV, how exciting was that? It was like we were, we won the lottery, all right? Now, we had those TVs. A lot of times they were little small ones, okay? And we plugged them into the wall, and we got like 3 channels, okay? And if you wanted to watch something, you turned on the channel and you had to find something that, was cool to watch if it was on. And then at, I think, midnight or whatever time it was, I think it was midnight every night, the TV turned off. You had white noise. You had the national anthem, then white noise. Okay? So it was like, okay, time to go to bed or time, whatever, we're done. Now, finding a show that was coming on was exciting, wasn't it? Think about it. If you are of age to think back in those days, how exciting was that? To know that a show was coming on that you enjoy. Next step, was I might get these out of order because I don't exactly remember, but I think, moving up was more television channels, okay, as they started getting better signals and such. Then we got to a point where you can get the ears, the bunny ears, and it'd pick up other channels that normally you wouldn't get. Okay, so that was a novelty, right? Then we got to a point where I think it was probably next in the progression where the TVs started getting more streamlined. Okay, then we got cable TV, and it was like, holy eureka, oh my God, this is so exciting. I feel like I, was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And from there, from cable television, we started getting VHS tapes where we were able to record. And like I said before, that was a huge novelty because not only did we have cable television where we can see movies that we couldn't see before unless we saw them in the theaters, right? Now we can record them, and they were on at multiple times so we can catch them. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. I could see these movies almost anytime I want and then record them and see them anytime I want. Oh, this is so exciting. Right? Then they moved into streamlining it, of course, from VHS, I think they went to DVD to Blu-ray, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, they also upgraded the cable television thing to a point where we got internet and such. Then we were able to actually pull up on the internet. We have everything from live TV. We are there now. Everything from live TV to channels that we can pick and choose, movies we can pick and choose. Okay, we can stream just about anything. Some of it we have to pay, some of it, a lot of it we don't, right? And in that moment, we can DVD it, or we can record it in that moment with just like a thumb drive or whatever system you have. I personally have never had that Tito or anything like that. I've never had a DVR, but people can schedule it. You don't have to be there anymore. If it is playing at a certain time, or like I said, you can stream it and then just go binge watch. Right? Now think of the telephone, how it's progressed, okay? It was a big deal when it went to button telephone, touch button. I remember that, and that was exciting. It made us feel like this is so cool because it had buttons on the telephone. Oh, and I forgot to talk about the remote control on the television too. That was a big deal because I still remember actually having to change the channel and arguing with my sister and us both being so stubborn that we refused to turn the television to something we knew was coming on that we really wanted to watch because neither one of us would actually listen to the other one. When the other one would say, no, you change it. Nope, I'm not listening to you. So that was a big deal. Now we can put a remote control on our telephone if we want. Isn't that wild? So that's the progression of that technology as far as the telephone. It was a big deal when we got call waiting. And I don't even remember which came first, whether it was call waiting or whether it was a answering machine. Well, I still have an answering machine. That's for my home phone. I do have an answering machine because I really don't answer my home phone. You have to leave a message in order for me to answer unless I recognize the number, which I barely ever do because of all these robocalls and stuff. See, that's the downside and all of it with that. So anyway, we've progressed up to that point with the telephone, and it was such a cool thing to be on the phone and have somebody call in. So we didn't have to worry about if we were waiting for a phone call and the phone coming up busy. Then being able to come home where we were no longer, that's the funny part, we were no longer attached to our phone in the way that if we were expecting a call, they can leave a message. That was such a relief. I remember that feeling as well. I really thought, wow, this is just the coolest thing ever. Whoever would have thought we'd get to this point, okay? Never even talking about, three-way calling and all those different devices, all those different features, and then being able to see the phone number popping up. Wow, okay? To, progressing to the point where it was a cordless phone. We didn't even have to be attached to the wall anymore. And the next thing you know, they had car phones. Oh my gosh, you can talk on the phone when you're in your vehicle if you're waiting for a call that's important. We had everything from beepers. So if somebody was calling, it would beep you and you would know to go to a pay phone or something. Payphones were a big deal. Calling cards. How freeing. If you're thinking back in time, do you remember these moments and how freeing that was and how exciting that was to upgrade? This is the main point of the show, by the way, right there. The excitement attached to upgrading. And those were upgrades to us. Back in the day, those of us who, been around for 50 years, like me, I can say that, and it feels good. can see those upgrades and how those small upgrades were huge in our minds, right? Now we are to the point where we have cell phones that are our computers. We can do everything from take videos, use it as a camera. We can go on social media. We can immediately stream. We can watch movies, watch shows. We can actually use it as a telephone. We can text. We can use it as a remote control. We can use it as a flashlight. We have at the tips of our fingers anything we want to do. We can go and find an app for it, okay, in the moment. If you don't know something, if we need directions, pull up a GPS. If you don't know something, you can just ask Google, okay? Or, if you have Siri or whatever. Okay, now, how excited are you now? Okay, those of us who've been around a long time might be a little more excited, but yet a little more nervous about it. But what I'm noticing for me, myself, personally, as being around this whole time when I can still remember working for it, okay, it's getting less and less exciting. The more convenient it is, the less exciting it is for me, okay? These upgrades don't excite me anymore. They kind of make me nervous, honestly. Now, think about that. Think about if you really are getting as excited as we got when we suddenly had VHS ability to record. That was exciting. Now that we have so much given to us and so much at our fingertips, not only are we becoming lazier, we're relying more on that device. How do you feel when you leave your cell phone at home? Some of us from back in the day might feel a little bit of panic because we're used to it, but also might feel relief that we are suddenly disconnected a little bit from everything. That's how I feel. Now, going back within yourself and thinking about how you truly feel as time goes by and as we're given more and more and more at our fingertips, okay? That lack of excitement, at least on my part, and I'm assuming a lot of people feel this way, is going down, right? Think about the millennials or anyone who's been born into this world. You're born, I see kids running around with cell phones, pulling up games, pulling up internet, doing all of that I never had when I was a kid. Do I look at them as lucky? Am I, what's the word? I'm losing all these small words. That's funny because I'm also drinking coffee. Do I look at them in awe? What is the word? Not jealous, but okay, well, we'll just say that because the word I'm trying to think of is slipping my mind, and it's slipping my mind. Why? Because I'm not going to get on my phone right now and say it, because chances are that word will pop up in something because I'm talking and my phone's sitting there. That's the privacy thing. But my point is, am I jealous of these kids who right now as kids have all this technology and all this in their hands? Absolutely not. Because it's not exciting. Okay? As time goes by and as things progress even more and more, it's going to get less and less exciting. Okay? Now, that's where we went with the conversation. I started talking about how I have always said this. I've told you this story before. I'm going to quickly tell you this story as well. When I was a kid, I had my first job, I think when I was 15, I think it was an unofficial job. I was riding around on an ice cream bike. Other than babysitting and lawn mowing and stuff. See, I did all that for money. I babysat. I mowed lawns. I worked really hard to get my money. Okay? Here's where I'm saying, don't take this offensively. But there is a different work ethic when it comes to like working hard for a little amount. Okay? And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that this is the way I felt when I was a kid. It was exciting for me. I would work really hard. I would mow my grass, or my parents' grass. I would also mow the neighbor's grass, and I would get paid for it. So my parents paid me an allowance, and, my allowance was always based on what I do around the house, of course, mowing the grass, feeding the horses, doing the dishes, and, cleaning the house on Saturdays and such. So, that's where I got my money. All right. So as time progressed, and my first official job was working at McDonald's, as far as, W-2s and all that kind of stuff. My first official job was working at McDonald's, and as I progressed at McDonald's, I went there for minimum wage, and as I progressed over the year and a half to 2 years, whatever that I worked there, I actually moved along from all the different stations they have there to the point where I became a hostess. And every time I would qualify on something or start running a certain, what am I trying to say? All the different positions there. There's actually a lot to learn, by the way, working in a place like McDonald's. I actually worked really hard and I learned a lot. And I learned that the harder you work and the harder you work to display professionalism and such, the more money you get. Okay, so I would get like a nickel raise, a dime raise at a time. A dime raise was a big deal for me. Now I understand this was back in the day. It's not really about comparing, what people are asking for now as far as money and such, but it's a little bit about that. So anyway, I became the hostess, and then I became a shift manager. And as I progressed, what came along with that 5, 7, 10 cent raise each, however often they did our evaluations, was a certain amount of pride in my job. I was proud of myself for accomplishing that. Okay. So moral of the story is that, through those small jobs, okay, I made the amount of money and I allowed that amount of money to build up. That was my money. And there were certain things I was allowed to use that money for, and certain things as I grew older that I was expected to pay for on my own. Now, it started off with just my mom and dad decided to put a telephone line when I became of age where I was calling my friends in high school and such more often. Part of growing up was, okay, now you can have your own phone. So they put my own line in my bedroom. Okay, so that, I believe, was the first thing I was required to pay for. Okay. I remember, and I think it was like $20-some a month or maybe even less. So that was a responsibility. So I got a perk, a reward for a responsibility, or for, that was part of my responsibility. And I was proud of that. I was proud to give that money over because I finally felt like I'm working for something. I'm paying for it. It's mine. Okay. Now that progressed to a point where there are certain things over time that I was allowed to use that money for. At one point, I remember building up money for the ice cream bike, as a matter of fact, that my mom said, well, you made all this money now. Go ahead and buy your clothes, your school year, the school year clothes. Okay. Now, you can look at that as, oh, okay, now suddenly the parents aren't paying for the clothes. But what came along with that was I was allowed to pick out those clothes as long as they were approved by my parents. I couldn't start picking out skimpy things, but I was allowed to pick out my own clothes. Up until that point, I would go clothes shopping with my mom, and she would basically be the yay or nay person, but she would pick out the clothes for me. Okay. And so that was the next step up. Now, what was that teaching me? A little at a time. That was teaching me it was teaching me how to survive. Ultimately, when we're on our own and we have to work for a living and we have to decide where our money is going to go, what we're going to spend it on or waste it on, okay, you have to start somewhere. All right. With us, we started as kids when we were given the responsibility to do the dishes, to feed the animals, to everything that we had to do, clean the house. Now, what that was also teaching us was how to do that stuff, how to be responsible for others, how to be responsible for pets, okay? Their existence, their livelihood depended on us, right? And it taught us self-sufficiency as far as cleaning and little, over time, maybe a little bit of cooking. We didn't learn that much cooking. My mom was a great cook, so we learned more by watching, but it gave us a good foundation, right? Now, doing all that kind of stuff and then being allowed to work my first job, like my first official job at McDonald's, what did that teach me? That taught me to be accountable to a boss, okay? To have coworkers who relied on me to show up and such and work well with, right? It taught me that outside of the household, the harder I worked, I would get what I wanted if I learned to be professional and work hard, okay? The more money I made was based on the harder I worked and the more I accomplished, okay? It was also teaching me responsibility as I went from my parents dropping me off for work to having my own car. That was actually the beginning of the story, but there's so much more that led up to that. And with that, there's a little bit of freedom that starts coming along as you grow up and as you're learning this stuff and as you're getting more and more responsibility as you learn this stuff. Okay, so the car story was that, and that's the main thing I always fall back on. I think about, excuse me, there's that throat thing. I think about the car story, how I got my first car. My first car. Now, I borrowed my parents at different times, and that was in itself such a feeling of freedom and like I earned something. Now I got my driver's license and I'm allowed to use the car at certain times, go in certain places. Okay. Now, as time progressed and as I showed responsibility in driving that car, I was given the opportunity to use the money that I built up from McDonald's. My dad was looking for cars. Now, these cars were very affordable. We're talking maybe a few $100 cars. Back in the day, you can get a decent car that was safe, a lot more than these days. Everything's computerized. But we can get, something pretty decent, sometimes for under $1,000. Okay. Now, my dad gave me the opportunity to pay 50% of the car to buy the car and pay for my insurance. Okay. And pay for my gas because I had a job. And I had to learn that what comes with that job and being able to make that money is to figure out what to save that money for. And that added the responsibility. You're responsible for this. So if you want to go and you want to have a shopping spree and use your money on, nights out with your friends, pizza parties and stuff, or clothes for school, just, extra more than you need or whatever, that's your choice. But in order to keep this car, you are required to pay this amount. Now, do you see what I'm saying as far as how I grew up? It was a progression. And in that progression, I learned pride. I was proud of what I accomplished, but I was also proud of what I got in return because I felt like it was mine. I felt like I worked for it. Okay. If I wanted better, I had to work harder. Right? Now, the first car I got, if I remember correctly, and I don't know if my dad told me the truth. He said he'd pay 50%. I think he probably paid a little more. I think he's told me that the car was like, and I could be wrong. Trust me, it was a long time ago, but I think he told me that the car itself was like maybe $500. So I came up with a couple $100 and he came up with a couple $100 supposedly. And then from there, monthly, I would pay for the insurance, of course, and then I would pay for my gas. Now, what paying for my gas taught me was gas utilization. Okay. If I wanted to just go, and always be gone and always be driving all over and trying to impress people or whatever the scenario was, keep in mind, I had to work for the money for that gas. So it taught me to really prioritize where to put my money. Okay. So this is teaching me pride in what I do, pride in what I develop within myself, right? It's slowly teaching me responsibility as well. Now, that car was an old Chevy Impala, which was huge, a huge car for a new time driver. My first car is this old Chevy Impala. Is that something that you'd be proud to be in? Most people would say, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. Not me. This thing didn't even have a radio. It didn't have a radio in it, right? I was so proud of that car. I absolutely loved the idea that was my car. I was proud of every bit of it, okay? So what that taught me is, my next step up as I progressed in life and I was able to make these decisions like, okay, this car is for sale. I want that. And it would always be used and it would always be cash. It wouldn't be, I didn't have car loans and such. I would upgrade. Every upgrade meant the world to me because every upgrade felt like I was climbing, like I was becoming more responsible, like I was becoming more successful as a standalone person. Now, as I moved along in the world and went into the Navy took care of me. But little by little, I got a little more freedom and a lot more responsibility. And that progressed to the point where I was in my first apartment at some point after the barracks. Now I had to take care of that. That was my responsibility, right? I continued to progress to the point where I am now. Okay, completely self-sufficient. That's part of the reason, I do all my independent stuff. Now, my point, because I only have I think 10 more minutes. Think about that scenario. Okay, I'm old school. I consider myself now old school. When I can look back at those things like before a cell phone, when I can look back at rotary phones connected to the wall, when I can look back at, big bulky televisions and that turn off at midnight and such. And that's, something to be excited about. When I looked at being excited getting a 5-cent raise when I actually worked really hard. I did too. That's a lot of work, right? But there was so much pride in that. I actually wanted to go out. I paid attention to the lawn when the lawn started getting a little too long. Our lawn, my neighbor's lawn, I would be on it and I would enjoy it. And the thing is, it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard work in the fact that when I was doing it, I sat here going, oh my God, I've got to work so hard. This is ridiculous. It's not worth it. There was so much joy and pride in what I was doing because I realized I was earning this and I was bettering myself, that I actually enjoyed it. I would mow the grass, and the more I did, the more accomplished I felt, the more successful I felt. I was, it gave me like a rise. It was euphoric to me. A lot of people I hear now complaining about not getting that brand new perfect car out of high school. I sit here going, I will never be able to get in that mindset, because here's my point, okay? I don't just want to talk about me, like my life, this is the way it should be. What I'm trying to open up people's minds to, and what this conversation I had actually really opened up in me, was what I think that the new generation and the new generations to come, because we were talking about that too, is like, if you think things are like that now, with all these things that they're talking about integrating, these computers and these robots and such, even past the robot I was telling you about, being able to react to our emotions and getting to know us on a personal level. Comparing that and all of the stuff about, the work, and I get it. So there's two sides to that. I get it. I do understand people wanting more than the minimum wage, working a hardcore job. In today's society, it's hard to keep up. I get it. Let's put that aside for a second. I'm talking about the pride in it. I'm talking about what those opportunities bring to you, okay, if you let it. Comparing all that to how I felt as a kid, with so little, it felt like so little, because those were beginning steps. Those are more than a lot of people get, and I get that. So for me, even saying that was so little, those were scraps, no. But the importance of that, when I felt like I had to work hard for everything that I got that gave me freedom, okay? Well, that's part of being a kid. You have to not earn your freedom. To a certain extent, when you get to a certain point, I believe you earn your freedom by doing that kind of stuff, by sticking to a job, by paying your own way, by learning and doing and cleaning house and all that. But to a certain extent, you're not supposed to be free until you are of age and until you have the mental capacity, because we are still growing and learning in our youth, right? We don't have the maturity to actually just go out there. Unless, some people do, of course, but my point is that when I compare the two, I'm much better off in my mind growing up when I did, because I take pride in things that I accomplish, okay? I don't take for granted what I get in this world. I'm full of pride when it comes to, even if I decide to upgrade, but another thing that I'm noticing, and this is what I want to draw people's attention to, is when you give too much, and when people are able to just get too much, whether it's money, they have so much money and their kids get anything they want, okay? Or society as it is, and the cell phones and such, when we have too much at the tips of our fingers, it desensitizes us to what we don't have, if that makes any sense to you. When we don't have something and we have to work for it, and then we work for it. And that's not just money-wise, work for it for the money. It's work to show responsibility so that we can be more responsible and suddenly get our own car. Or whatever it is. Work towards something, some sort of reward. It fills us with pride because we're able to relate to what we want and don't have. And we can make that determination if we want to put that much effort into achieving it or accomplishing it or gaining it, okay? When we have too much at the tips of our fingers, and it's only going to get more and more expansive in that way, we're not really seeing what we don't have in that way because we have it. When things are too convenient, we desensitize ourselves to the fact of what we have, okay? When I'm able to flip back and think of how it felt to get up and change the channel, versus right now I can practically think of a show I want and it's going to pop up, because that's almost where we're going. And I've heard this, where they're going is mind, like things reading our minds and reacting to it. And we're supposed to like that. And a lot of people think that's going to be great. Really? I'm looking at things from the past going, that's not going to be great. I don't want that. I want the majority of my life that I've had, because that's given me purpose. That's given me goals, motivation, inspiration, everything that is lacking in today's society from what I can see. And another thing, and I meant to mention this earlier, is heart. This is what we were talking about as well. My coworker and I were talking about how he was talking about coaching a basketball game and about how the kids that he had at this point, they weren't even trying. And it didn't matter to them. It didn't matter. And I said, there's a lack of heart these days. I'm not just talking, a lot of people would say, oh, bleeding hearts, okay, and compassion. That's not what I'm talking about. Going back to my show with Boom Boom Mancini, talking about my obsession with the Rocky series. Why am I obsessed with the Rocky series? Because it shows the heart inside, that desire, that inability to stop doing something that you feel like you're fighting for, okay? In that movie, that's what it was about. I can relate to that. I can relate to accomplishing things based on having the heart in it. I'm seeing a lack of that in today's society. There's not a lot of heart behind things because things are being handed to people. Not individually, I'm talking about collectively. All this technology is making us, everything is at our fingertips, okay? I don't look at that as a good thing. All right? Because where's our desire going to go? Okay, what are we going to wish for next? It's going to get to the point where we're wishing for something that's like, whatever, it's right around the corner anyway. Okay? You have to have heart. We need to get our hearts back, our desire to accomplish something, to work for something. Like I said, work for it, whether it's working on a job trying to get money, working towards something as studying something to get where we want to get, working towards something to show responsibility to move up the next level. Working on our inner selves, okay? I think with everything handed to us at this point, a lot of people are probably forgetting that we have our own internal being to work on being a better person, work on figuring out who we are deep inside. It's almost like it's being handed to us. This is who you are. You know, you've got nothing to work for because this is who you are. I'm going to give you all this technology. I'm going to give you everything you need. Don't worry about it. I got this. Which is giving up the control of our own lives. It's giving up our own identities, and that's exactly how I see it. I hope you're able to follow that as I'm meaning to put it out. Okay. So on a side note with that, that's what we were talking about. That I brought up the fact that the problem, I've seen this for years, people wanting to give their kids what they didn't have. I get it. I understand it. And there's a certain part of that I appreciate. But there's a lot of people who immediately out of high school want to give their kids like the best car, brand new, this and that. I disagree with that. Now, I can't tell people how to raise their kids. I can't tell you what's right or wrong. I would just like people to see my perspective and then make that decision on your own, obviously. If I would have had a kid, I would have done exactly what my parents did with me. It's as you get older that you look back and you respect more of how your parents taught you. Because I think these days, and I'm not criticizing, this is where I say don't take this offensively, I think people are getting taught, or kids are getting taught in a different kind of way. All right? But you respect that more when you're older, because I can always look back on that one thing, if nothing else. I can see the progression of who's made me the independent woman I am, and I appreciate that. I can see how that, including boot camp and everything else, had progressively taught me responsibility, progressively taught me pride and desire to achieve, and let's get, even better and succeed even more. When you hand somebody something right off the bat who has not really progressed to that point, and all of a sudden they get the golden of the golden, the brand new car, top notch, everything, where's the pride in upgrading? Especially if it was handed to you, especially if you didn't even have to pay for it. There's no pride anywhere from there. If you suddenly say, okay, I gave this to you in graduation. Now it's up to you in the future. If you want to upgrade. Well, kids can't just go out and upgrade if you got them this top-notch vehicle. Where's their pride in knowing that they actually earned it on many different levels? From there on, anything else is going to be downhill until they can reach a point to top it. How many years down the line is that? So anyway, I can go on and on this, by the way. There's such deep-rooted thoughts on this and feelings and such. I would love to share my own perspectives and my own history, but I'm out of time. So stay tuned now for Tiffany Lewis coming up next on Be the Change, and I will talk to all you lovely beings next Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on clearsourceradio.com. Good night, everybody. Have a great week.